We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Sonia. Good morning, everybody. We will go ahead and start the January 21, 2022 St. Paul Planning Commission meeting. This meeting is being held remotely as it's neither practical nor prudent for the Planning Commission and its committees to meet in person pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.02. This is in light of the ongoing health pandemic. Members of the Planning Commission cannot be present at the regular location, and all members of the Planning Commission will attend this meeting by telephone or other electronic means. We will begin this meeting by taking a roll call. Sonia?
Commissioner DeJoy, Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Holst,
Here.
Commissioner Hood,
Here.
Commissioner Kantner,
Here.
Commissioner McMurtry,
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell, Commissioner Moore,
Here.
Commissioner Presley,
Here.
Commissioner Riley,
Here.
Commissioner Risberg,
Here.
Commissioner Said,
Here.
Commissioner Taggia, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Underwood,
Here.
Commissioner Yang, Commissioner Yang, I see you. And of course, Chair Rango Morales.
Here. So I don't have any new announcements this morning. I'll turn it over to Director Pereira to see if he has anything he wants to update the commission on.
Yes, good morning. Sorry, we're realizing here our link to the meeting was not up on the website, so just sent that around to people in case you don't have it and you need to share it. Just a couple updates. The City Council acted on two significant zoning studies this week. The religious uses or religious accessory uses zoning study. The council chose to amend the package coming from the Planning Commission recommendation to allow a slightly longer length of stay for an emergency housing use. Capacity of housing is not limited by the zoning, but subject to building occupancy limitations within the zoning code. Within the fire code. So that is an update on that one. So they acted to approve with that amendment. In addition to that, the 1 to 4 unit housing study phase 1 was adopted as recommended by the Planning Commission. So that's another milestone on that study. So staff is happy that those have moved forward, as you can imagine. Also, in terms of a announcement, some of you may have seen we are beginning to publicize the opportunity for members of the community to participate in some virtual engagement for the 1 to 4 unit housing study, which is an ongoing study for phase 2. We have teamed up with several groups of district councils throughout the city and come up with 3 different sessions that they are co-hosting via Zoom. The first one is February 1st, the second one February 10th, and the third March 2nd. And all of them will be 6:30 to 8 p.m. Co-hosted by groups of district councils. The first one will be on February 1st will be Matt Groveland and Highland District Council co-hosting. Second one will be Como, Hamlin Midway, and North End neighborhoods co-hosting. And the third one on March 2nd is the Dayton's Bluff Community Council co-hosting with us, focused on East Side neighborhoods and the West Side. So with that, and I'll mention also that we have an engagement website that is launched for this project in addition to the project website. I'll put that into the chat. That will be updated with these dates and Zoom links for all of those meetings, and there's no need to RSVP in advance. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Padeta. Is there any questions for the director from the commission? All right, seeing none, we can move to the next item on the agenda, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Riley for zoning committee.
Ooh, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Engel Morales. The first item that we took last week was a complicated one for 470 South Lexington Parkway. This we had. Hang on just a second. We had a two. The project is considered the James Avenue Apartments. This was laid over from our previous meeting, and included both conditional use permit and variances for setbacks, along with site plan review for 5-story multifamily development with 114 dwelling units, 2 levels of structured parking, and sorry, my cat's trying to eat my breakfast, so apologize if I'm a little distracted. Go away, cat. The joys of online meeting. And we had a previous application for this in the spring of 2021. Same site, different project, or slightly different project, fewer number of units, fewer affordable units. And one of the reasons this was coming back is to add affordable units to the project. So basically, we're looking at a 5-story multifamily development with 114 dwelling units, 11 of which are affordable, with a conditional use permit for additional height, and some variances for setbacks, in order to accommodate the additional height and some changes to the design of the building. We came out of committee on Thursday with no recommendation. We had 3 in favor and 3 opposed. The initial vote the previous week was for to consider denial of the application. And I initially, and I'll just start with my perspective, my initial response was to vote for denial because it was unclear to me that even with the even with the additional height and the addition of additional affordable units, that the setback variances were needed. So we got an additional, really wonderfully executed memo from staff, sort of outlining the differences between the application that we saw in the spring that we voted to recommend approval for, and this application, and really clearly outlined, and you can see that in the tables, especially I think on page 3, for how the setbacks relate to the site, how the slope sort of makes for the practical difficulties that the staff found for in the staff report, when it comes to height and laying the building out on the lot. So we come to you with no recommendation, 3 in favor and 3 opposed. I wanted to give everyone my thoughts on why I changed my vote, and my vote was changed based on the additional staff memo items. Yesterday, Director Pereira sent us additional information that can help us in our decision making today. He provided us with 2 resolutions, one for approval and one for denial. And the site plan has a single resolution for conditional approval because approval of the site plan as provided depends upon the approval of the CUP and the variances. So if we deny today the CUP and variances, that's a de facto denial of the site plan. Based on state statute, we have to make this decision today. The resolutions that we have in front of us include the approval resolution, which reflect the staff recommendation and align with the staff recommendation for the previous applications for this site. And the denial resolution reflects the rationale that some of us gave during various zoning committee meetings, and that would include the last meeting in which we ended up 3-3, and the previous meeting in which I believe we recommended denial 4-2. Is that? I think that's a clear explanation of this particular case. And at the pleasure of the rest of the commission, perhaps others from the committee would like to share their perspective prior to taking any questions. But perhaps if there are specific questions that aren't related to our opinions, I could take those now.
Yep, so I'm going to open the floor for commissioners to ask questions, but then also, I think because it's a rare circumstance in which the committee comes out towards, or something comes out of committee without a recommendation for the full planning commission. If there are particular questions from commissioners to committee members, I would also entertain those questions so that people can fully understand sort of the dynamics of the of the discussion that was had at committee over the course of 2 meetings. So I see that it's Commissioner Grill and then Commissioner Riley.
I just wanted to add one thing. I think I did ask staff to potentially prepare a short presentation if we needed one. I'm not sure what happened with that request, but I'm sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner Grill. Please go ahead.
I think I have a question about that too. I think also just procedurally, I'm wondering if you're looking for a motion before the discussion. I think that big question would be to the chair.
Yeah, so at this point, I think let's have a bit of discussion and time to ask questions for staff before we make a motion. And the only reason I say that is because if the first motion that comes out is to deny, we need to make sure that people understand the procedure for making the motion and then also the sort of the reasoning that needs to be laid on the record. It doesn't matter whether it's for or against. We just need to make sure that we follow the proper procedure. And so I think to not get caught up in the weeds of having a discussion after the motion, and I'd rather just do that first, and then someone can move either for or against.
Okay. I will thank you for that, and I'll just sort of briefly make my comments on this, if that's all right with the two of you. So this is Commissioner Grill. I am in favor of the project. I'm in favor of making a motion to approve the staff recommendation and to move that along. I think the project is only minimally different from what we saw last time. I think it adds 2 additional units of affordable housing. I think it adds additional housing units somewhere where we need it pretty badly. And it does it all with about 4 additional feet in height. And based on the slope and based where the project is located, I do think that there are actual hardships to the owner of the building. I also just think that this is a better project than the previous one and the one that would be built theoretically if we didn't approve this. It has balconies, it's oriented onto Lexington, it has less parking for vehicles, more parking for bikes, and more units and those additional units. I also think that the building owner did really all of those things that we requested of people. And for folks that weren't on the commission when this was around the last time, this project came up. We passed the housing, the density bonuses that if you include affordable housing, you can add additional units. They're one of the first people, maybe the first people to take advantage of that. And I'm actually just really surprised that we didn't reach a resolution within the committee. So I am overwhelmingly in favor of the project. And at a time in which it's appropriate, I would like to make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Grill. Commissioner Moore?
Good morning, everyone. I have a comment and question. I read each of the reports. What I'm having a difficult time is visualizing the issue of sloping and how it plays into the denial. So that's one. And then 2, and I don't know the procedures on this, but was there any public comment on this project at all? And if so, can you share what those were? Thank you.
Yeah, so to Commissioner Moore's question, I'll provide some feedback, then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Riley and then staff. So I wasn't at the zoning committee this past meeting on Thursday, this last meeting that we had, but I was there at the original meeting that laid it over for 2 weeks. And I also voted no based on questions about whether or not the slope actually made it difficult to grant the variance. You need to find that there was a practical difficulty um, related to the property. And so the rationale that was used by, the part of the rationale that was used by staff was that the slope of the property required it to be built in the way that it was. And then during, when we had the public hearing portion, we had someone on behalf of the applicant come in and talk about, and they essentially sort of put a question to that. And then staff took 2 weeks and they came back and they were able to clarify exactly how that was the case, that the slope played into having to build the design the way that it was. And it was really helpful the way that Commissioner Riley had noted. I will turn over to Anton or Luis or Mr. Richards or Mike to see if they could maybe provide a visual for the commission of what that means in terms of the slope being an obstacle. And then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Riley on the second question for Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Chair.
So is there someone from staff that could better answer that question with regards to the slope of the property?
Yeah, Chair, I am looking to pull up a visual here. But in general, as I do that, the change in slope over the course of the lot is 25 feet, which is, about 2 stories of building. And the highest point is right on Lexington, the northwest corner of the lot, sloping away to the opposite corner of the lot. And the way height is measured in St. Paul is to take the average grade of the building and then measure from the average grade to the height. So when you have a sloping lot like this, it slopes kind of away from the street. That adds to the height measurement in a way that makes the height bigger than it would, look than if you're walking on Lexington. And I'm sorry, I'm going slow here or talking slow, but it's because I can't do 2 things at once.
So maybe Anton, while you get that, because I do think the visual, and so then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Riley to provide input. And I don't want to, I know there was an additional letter that was included with Anton's updated memo. I don't want to talk about that letter unless it was made part of the record by committee and accepted, because I know the public hearing was closed. But can you comment on that, right, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rangel Morales. Regarding testimony, the letter that was included in the supplemental materials was essentially because I failed to allow the applicant an opportunity to respond to some of the commentary at the second zoning committee meeting, in part because I didn't, or at the first zoning committee meeting, in part because of the irrelevant commentary that was taking place during the meeting. And so if folks want to read that in order to see the comments that are addressing the conditional use permit and the variance, those parts were considered part of the record, and we acknowledged the labor dispute as being a thing, but we were asked, and I asked the full commission today to just ignore that as it is not germane to the zoning cases themselves. We did receive several comments from neighbors addressing concern about the scale and massing of the application and the building as described in the site plan and in the conditional use permit and variances, noting that there's plenty sort of things like there's plenty of room on the site to build a reasonably sized apartment building, that the massing would have a negative impact on the existing character of the neighborhood. And I think we received a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're about, hang on, like Anton, I can't do two things at once either. But the item, we received about 10 comments opposed to the project, but many of those comments were not addressing the conditional use permit and variances and site plan review themselves. However, as Director Pereira notes in the staff in the chat, the Mac Groveland Community Council District 14 did vote to recommend approval of the CUP and variances at the meeting held on December 1st, 2021. So thank you, Director Pereira, for that additional information. And if anyone else has any questions related to commentary, but otherwise, I think that's the summary about the concerns from the public.
Okay. So thank you for that clarification, and then I'll turn over to Anton. And Anton, just something that was really helpful for me, given that is part of the record, was the visual provided by the applicant in response to the public hearing, and sort of where they laid out that if you were to just build this across the street, kitty corner, there would be no need for variances. And so that sort of explained to me the practical difficulty in the slope. But I'll let you answer that, and I'll turn to Commissioner Hood, who I think provided valuable input as to, or I know it sounds like he voted against, so I think he could provide valuable input about why he voted no.
Thank you, Chair. So this is probably the best example that shows you the what the slope would look like in relation to the building. So this view in the upper right corner of the page here is looking from Lexington Avenue. So you'll see kind of a level entryway here, what looks to be, a 5-story building, and then the slope, as I said before, slopes away from the building. And here, looking from the other side of the building, you can see how from Lexington it slopes down basically 2 stories. So in the supplemental memo that I'm switching to right now, you can see that if this building was just on a flat site, so you kind of take away that slope, you build the same thing, same site. The way the height is calculated and the way the slope affects the height, it basically adds 14 feet to the building, which is, over a story. And due to the uniqueness of RM2 building requirements, that also adds 7 feet of setback on the front and or the back and sides of the building, which further reduces your buildable area for the site and leaves you with less of a space to place the building. And as the chair mentioned, the applicant also provided another example of what if this same building was picked up and put on the corner of Lexington and Randolph in the first 6 lots, as it's on 6 lots on this side. And there, let's see if I can pull that up. The building wouldn't need any variances. It would still need a conditional use permit for height, but due to the regular size of the lot there and the flatter, more gradual slope of that lot, it would have the slope would have little effect and it could be built without variances. And I'm just looking for that visual too, but I can pull it up quickly here. So this is of the building, with the red is the setback requirements, and then on the lower right hand or lower left hand is the same building, just moved kitty corner to Randolph and Lexington, from the 6 lots where it is now to the 6 lots there. And you'll see that those lots are a little bit bigger because there's no jog in James Avenue to deal with, reducing the size of the lots, and there's a negligible slope. So that same building would fit within the required setbacks, and would be, let me see what the building height would be calculated at 55 feet rather than 69 feet. So I'm happy to answer more questions, but hopefully that kind of gets at the heart of it.
Thank you.
All right, I'll turn over to Commissioner Hood.
Thank you, Chair Rangel Morales. Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one, and I was someone who had originally voted in favor of the proposal when we saw it last year, last summer. All right, let me just go. In my opinion, there's not really been a compelling case as to why these variances are not driven for economic reasons alone. I'd love to support more housing within the neighborhood. I live nearby here. I'd love to see the additional units, but when I look at the code and I look at how we need to view things as commissioners, I just don't feel as if there's a legally compelling case as to why the setback and height variances are not economic. I don't see the slope as a compelling reason. We use this for the past approval. So for the commissioners who don't know, we did approve, I believe, 92 units on this site along with the rezone some time ago. We use slope as the justification for approving it, and I think on second thought, I think that was a flimsy argument. It was flimsy then, and I think it's flimsy today. So I'm going to be voting in favor of a denial on this one, not because I don't want additional housing in the neighborhood near me, but because just being a commissioner trying to follow the code, I just don't think there's a legally compelling case as to why these variances should be granted.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Hood. And then I'll turn over to Commissioner Taglia.
Thank you, Chair. So I also wanted to share my rationale. So I had, again, voted against this in committee. And I focused on the comparative record between the two. I think it's very clear looking at the table, the differences. So we already approved, and this applicant already has the approval to build a building with 91 units instead of 114. So we're already taking a site that had 6 single-family homes and massively increasing density, including originally 9 affordable units were planned. So when the applicant came to us back in March, he had managed to overcome the difficulties of slope and the difficulties of the site and propose a 91 unit building, which we voted to approve. Now, when you look at the comparison, what's being requested is really driven by economic considerations alone. So if you look at sort of the table on page 2 of the memo, you can see that now the difference between the front setback of 18 feet and the current application, which says 18 feet brackets 13'9" to balconies, and similarly the south side, which says the same thing, 10 feet or 10 as it was, but 4.5 feet to balconies. The only justification for the additional required setbacks is the addition of balconies, which in this application protrude, and in the previous application was sort of embedded within the footprint, which doesn't seem like an economic, doesn't seem like a practical difficulty to me. It seems like purely economic. The other part which I can't get past from the record is looking at the proposal. It's clear that what happened between the two things that changed between March and today have really nothing to do with the site. The first was that we passed the minimum parking requirement elimination, and therefore the applicant was able to eliminate a certain number of parking spaces and add units without needing to add parking spaces. And secondarily, that they had simply miscalculated the maximum allowable FAR. They hadn't realized that they could add additional FAR for the alleyway. So the original application, which again is already approved, allowed them to go up to FAR 2.75 based on a smaller calculated square footage, which they sort of hit. And so they've come back with wanting a larger building simply because they miscalculated and realized they could have additional FAR. So when I look at this, the record itself doesn't permit me to make a finding under subsection C that the applicant has established that practical difficulties are not for economic reasons alone. And it's this sort of comparison between the March record and the current record, which kind of fatally undermines that for me. I note again that the applicant does have permission to build the building in the left table, which would allow 91 units, of which 9 would be affordable.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Taglia. Commissioner Grill?
I can pause. I was trying to wait until everyone spoke, so I want to make sure I'm not jumping the queue. But if I'm not, I do just want to reiterate that I think comparing the two projects to one another, I think there is benefit in that in a different way, maybe than Commissioner Taglia. I think taking advantage of the parking reduction is something that we wanted. It's something that's in keeping with the comp plan. I think reorienting the building onto Lexington is something that we want. That's something that, reflects the comp plan. I think adding balconies and adding outdoor space to properties, particularly in the light of COVID, is something that we want to have and we want to encourage. And I think I personally have no issue with the applicant taking advantage of the things that we have changed since their projects first progressed. I think that's exactly sort of what we're asking people to do. And I hopefully I'm not misunderstanding Commissioner Taglia too, because I'm generally in keeping sort of with his rationales. But this is where it diverges for me. And I think adding the additional bike parking, reducing the vehicle parking, taking advantage of those density bonuses, adding additional affordable housing units, adding additional units, all of those things are things that we're asking applicants to do, or we're hoping that they do. And it's something that improves the project to me versus deteriorates the project or makes it a worse project. I also think that the slope argument is incredibly moving, particularly when you do see, if you picked up and dropped this on a different parcel, the impacts that would have, and just how much harder it is to build a building on this particular property. I also live in the neighborhood and live off of Lexington, and would really welcome the property and the residents. We also have a bus line there. We have a grocery store. We have a lot of things that support additional density. And I think, if you're thinking about ideal places to put a building like this around the city, Lexington is one of those places that you might choose. So just reiterating my reasons for voting for the project.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Grill. I'll turn over to Commissioner Taglia, and then I'll make a comment for the other commissioners that were not part of the committee about the interrelatedness between the CUP and the variances, because they are two different issues, but they are related to each other and they are dependent on each other. But I'll turn over to Commissioner Taglia, and then I'll make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. So I do want to point out that personally, I also like this project for many of the reasons Commissioner Grill mentioned. I like the affordability. I like the huge addition of density versus the single-family homes on the site. When I look at the previous application we approved, I see those benefits. I mean, the original application that we approved was oriented to Lexington. It did include a significant amount of bike parking. It did include balconies, but those balconies were embedded into the building footprint rather than projecting from the building footprint. And I don't see a reason why we couldn't retain balconies, but retained within the building footprint, especially as the building footprint has got larger between the applications. Originally, on the south side, it was only the front part of the building that kind of took the full allocation we'd approved, and so this building could get significantly larger while staying within the original approved boundaries. Where I differ from Commissioner Grill is, despite personally liking it and thinking it's a superior building and thinking it's more in line with the things we want people to take advantage of in the comp plan, we still need a legal reason to get from what we've previously approved to what they're requesting now. And again, the record is so clear that that it's obvious on just a purely factual basis from their own testimony that their reasons for moving this particular set of applications are economic.
So I guess I'll add this, and I hope commissioners have can access the report, because I think the crux of what we're discussing, just to simplify the issue for commissioners that are not in the zoning committee, on page 4 of either of the recommendations that Director Pereira sent out, you have under you have this is a page that has to do with the standard for the variances, and the comments that Commissioner Tagiab is commenting to is on paragraph C. It says the applicant has established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the provision, and economic considerations alone do not constitute a practical difficulty. And then also letter D, which is the plight of the landowners unique due to circumstances to the property not created by the landowner. And Commissioner Tagiab can chime in if I'm misunderstanding his argument, and then staff can chime in if I'm misunderstanding the interrelatedness between the CUP and the variances. But for all the other commissioners, just to sort of simplify, the question is first, should we grant a CUP, a conditional use permit, allowing them to go higher? And then the second question is whether we should allow them to build closer to, I guess, the edge of the property, whether it's on either side or the back or the front. And the interrelatedness between the two is that in this, as you go higher, you have to be farther away from the edge of the property. And so they're related in the sense that because they want to go as high as they do, it requires them to come closer. And so that's when the variances come into play. And to Commissioner Tagiab and Commissioner Hood's point, I understand that C and D to them is not met. And originally for me, and from what it sounds like Commissioner Riley, we had questions about that as well. Whether this was just due to wanting to go bigger in the property. For me, seeing the drawing that Anton just put up that showed that this property, if it was just built kitty corner in a land that was not sloped, that to me meets the definition of one, a practical difficulty that is not related to economic considerations. Economic considerations, perhaps, I'm not going to go into it, but it may have been why they went bigger, but it's not the sole reason. It says economic considerations alone, and that's not the sole reason, because if this property was flat, they would have been able to build without these variances. Then the only question for us would have been about the CUP, and we had already approved a CUP for a building of at least that height of 55 feet. I don't know if that helps clarify some of the issues, but I'll turn over to Commissioner Mitchell, and then Commissioner Riley, and then Commissioner Underwood.
Morning. I have just some clarification on procedure, because when I saw the email from you, basically you're saying if we deny something on, we need to state our denial at this time, or do we vote? I just need clarification, because if I vote to deny, do you need my statement? I just want to understand.
Yep, so if you vote to deny, so whatever, if the motion is to approve and you vote not in favor of approving, so you vote no, what I would ask you to do is to state the rationale for your no. If the vote to approve fails, we would then take a motion to deny, and we would do a new roll call, and people can again state the reasons why they are in favor of denying. We need to, so every person that votes needs to provide the rationale if they're voting to deny. And I'll turn over to our legal counsel, Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Chair, if I may, I would suggest that you not take that approach. First of all, you need to figure out what motion you're going to have, whether it's a motion to approve or a motion to deny. If it's a motion to approve, I would advise you to take your roll call as you normally would. If people vote against the application, they don't need to state their reasons at that time. They can simply vote no. If that motion then fails under 1599, that's a denial. And at that time, then you will need a motion, a formal motion to deny, at which time the reasoning for the denial has to be stated on the record. I think the way that you've suggested, my legal advice would be that really overly complicates the vote, assuming that the vote is on a motion to approve. So sorry to interrupt, but I would also suggest that commissioners talk about the merits of the application, whether they're for or against them right now, and we can discuss the procedural matters later.
Thank you for that, Mr. Warner. And so, did that make sense, Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes, it does, and I will speak later. I need to think of how I want to approach this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchell. Commissioner Riley, and then Commissioner Underwood.
Since I've already spoken, Chair, I would defer to Commissioner Underwood, but I would like to go after that if there's no one else who hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, there's two other people, and then I'll call on you, and then Commissioner Moore. So Commissioner Underwood, and then Commissioner McMurtry.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Zoning Committee for the extensive work on this, and I just wanted to share that I am planning to vote in favor of this project today. As been noted, this site has been before us before, and I agree with Commissioner Gruhl that we should not be looking at that application. This is a different application, but I have spent time, that part of the neighborhood isn't too far from me. I have spent time walking around in this area, and the needs of this building make sense, and the opportunities that it's providing make sense. And I agree that this is a good location for these types of buildings. We all agree, we have throughout all of our work together, that we need these apartments, and this location makes sense. It will fit with the buildings at the end of Lexington, and we know that there's going to be more opportunities along Lexington. Recently, this body voted against a project on Lexington north of here because there was great community concern about that site not supporting the community. In this instance, it's very understandable that there are immediate neighbors concerned. I mean, I'm glad they're involved, and they should be, and the site owners really need to work with those neighbors, but the district council supports this. Other people support it, and it's meeting what it needs. I like the changes that have happened over time, and the response to the changes this body has driven, and the city council. So I just overall, we need to do this. It's ready to go. I'm going to vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Underwood. Commissioner McMurtry and then Commissioner Riley.
Thank you, Chair. I have a quick clarifying question just to better understand what the options are here and possible next steps. So I know that we were shown kind of a graphic of the parcel across the street and how that being a flat surface would make this a lot easier. Has this been, is this something that is on the table? Is the site owner considering if we were to deny this to then move forward with possibly putting these apartments on that flat surface? I just wanted to make sure I understood if that was an option that was on the table and if it's something that the site owner was considering.
I think that was just provided as a visual to show that if the property that they own was flat, what that would mean in terms of what they would be requesting of us in general. So that was just more of a hypothetical from my understanding.
Gotcha. Okay, that's extremely helpful. So with that, I am in agreement with Commissioner Grill and Commissioner Underwood. I think this is an area that would really benefit with this additional housing, especially being along such a busy transportation corridor. And knowing that the district councils have also voiced their approval and recommendation for this site, I think we all agree that more housing, especially affordable housing, is needed, and so I too will be voting in favor.
Right. Commissioner Riley and then Commissioner Moore.
Thank you, Chair Rangel Morales. I wanted to make note of two things that came to mind while the chair was speaking about his rationale. The first addresses the practical difficulties and the word alone when it comes to economic considerations. I think for me, that was where I was stuck. Um, I think when I take the word alone and I think about what it takes to build housing in this metropolitan area and really in the nation, and what it takes to build housing for people who have fewer resources, often that means that a developer has to spend more money in order to not ask for additional resources from city coffers, et cetera. And so I think that when I look at, yes, perhaps the building is larger because of financial considerations in part. I think about the project East 7th, known as the Cambric, which is a mixed income housing for seniors that also had very similar practical difficulties. And while certainly economics was a part of the scenario, it wasn't the only thing. And I think what we're looking at here is a project that meets the intent and the purpose of the zoning code of the comp plan first and foremost. And as I've mentioned before, the comp plan is the thing from which all other things flow. And every once in a while, as we've seen with the 1 to 4 zoning, 1 to 4 unit housing zoning study and other zoning studies, zoning codes need to change in order to accommodate the policy direction and the needs of the community. And in this scenario, I think we have a site that is a really great one for this kind of density in terms of its proximity to transit and other resources, much as Commissioners Grill and Underwood and Chair Rangel Morales have said. And that comp plan document that we have that's sort of relatively new to us, it is directing us to think critically about increasing density in certain places around the city of St. Paul in order to accommodate the folks who live here. And when we have a city where nearly 40% of the population, and that includes a lot of children, are living in poverty, or certainly at and below area median income, having places for them to live that are easily accessible to things like transit and food. And that's true for all of us, right? All of our neighbors need that. And so here on the east side, we see more density proposed. on a regular basis, and we're talking here about an application that really meets the spirit and intent of the comp plan, and we have a zoning code that just needs a little tweaking in order to accommodate it. That's kind of how I've been thinking about this over the last, month, I guess, that we've been talking about it. So I don't know if that helps anyone else in their calculus, but thank you very much for your time. And I hope folks will vote in favor. Thanks.
Commissioner Moore?
Thank you. My question is related to Commissioner Riley's comments about local coffers. Do you know if this project has received, or the applicant has received, any housing infrastructure bonds or any state or local funding for this project?
So I'll turn over to Anton for that more detailed answer on that, because I don't know.
Chair, Commissioner Moore, the applicant is not seeking any public funding for the project.
But I will, to that, Commissioner Moore, the applicant is taking advantage of our RM2 allowance of going higher if they build affordable housing into, or taking up a bigger FAR if they build affordable housing into the project. So it's sort of the, I guess, a practice run by the city of trying to incentivize developers to build affordable housing into their market rate projects.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Grove? And then Commissioner Hood.
I was going to make a motion because there weren't any other hands up, but I can wait for Commissioner Hood.
Commissioner Hood?
Thank you, Chair. I guess I agree this is a good site for it, but I just keep coming back to, do you believe that the slope is a practical difficulty? And I think the answer is no. It's not. And I think that this is being done for economic reasons only. Additionally, yes, the added density is good. Just to note, we've already done that in that area. From the original proposal versus what was originally there, we have increased density from approximately 6 single-family homes to, I believe it was 91 or 92 units. I believe, I'm not very good at math, but I think that's about a 14 or 15 times increase in the density already in that area. So I guess, is it a practical difficulty? I say no. Is it being done for economic reasons only? I believe that it is. So those are my final comments pre-vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hood. Commissioner Mitchell, and then I don't know if Commissioner McMurtry has a question or.
Good morning again. So I looked at this over and over this morning and even last night, and my question was the slope and how it was really going to be buttoned up against the property line, and that has been my biggest concern about this. And also, when the other concern was the affordable housing, because when you really look at the numbers, it's not, he's not really increasing a lot of affordable housing, because he's increasing affordable and non-affordable. And I always have that question, what is affordable housing? We use that term, but you're not telling me if it's 60% or 30% of median income. And that's not I don't see anything written about what is affordable housing. What is the definition for this site? So I'm not in favor at this time for this. I would be voting for no.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Mitchell. I will note, I think that's been a general frustration for as many years as I've been in the Planning Commission, or all the years that I've been in the Planning Commission, is sort of the term of affordable housing and whether that really means it's affordable. It's more, what I've come to understand it is that it essentially means that it's by definition affordable, not necessarily in practicality. But that's, I think that's a larger issue and larger question than we're going to get to here. I do think it's great that the developer is taking advantage of sort of an incentive that the city put out to maintain at least some affordability. Whether it's the ideal affordability, it's a different question. So I'll turn to Commissioner Riley and then Commissioner Pereira and then Anton. Oh, sorry, Director Pereira. sorry, Luis.
This is Commissioner Riley. I was going to address the affordable housing question, but Anton, is that what you were going to provide? Why don't you do that so you've got the facts? Thank you.
Chair, Commissioners, I was just going to clarify that affordable housing in this case is defined. It's 60% AMI, and that's what's in the RM2 zoning standards and was part of the RM2 zoning study. It was approved by Commission and City Council earlier last year. So in order to meet the density bonus, they need to provide 60% AMI housing. And that condition in the staff report is made one of the conditions, just as a belt and suspenders type condition for the cup. So it is spelled out as a condition in the staff report, and it's based on what's in the zoning code.
Director Pereira, I saw that you had your hand up and then you put it down. Is there a comment that you'd like to share?
Chair and Commissioner Mitchell, no, Anton addressed the question. I was going to jump in and talk about the percent area median income. The thing I'll add is part of the zoning standard to get that incentive for additional FAR is that the 60% of AMI units are affordable for at least 15 years, and we require documentation of that.
Commissioner Tagiev and then Commissioner Groh.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a procedural matter, I wondered if the Commission would entertain splitting the votes to allow the approval of the CUP versus the variances. We've talked about all of these in the round so far, and I wanted to clarify that I think the practical difficulties piece applies to the variances and not the CUP. In other words, for example, I personally would be in favor of the CUP for height. I think the applicants met their case there. It's specifically the additional front setback and the additional south setback, which relate to the desire to add balconies, which is the piece that I'm not able to get behind.
So I'll turn over to Anton about that. I know that the staff recommendation for approval is condition that the CUP is conditioned on approval of the variances, correct?
I'm sorry, Chair, could you, I got confused there for a second. Can you repeat that?
So is this staff recommendation for the CUP conditioned on approval of, it has a condition, correct? The condition being that the variances be approved, or is that completely separate?
Well, one of the conditions of a conditional use permit is that it meets all the findings for, or it meets all the regulations otherwise in the district. And to meet those regulations, we'd need to approve the variances. And just to clarify, one thing that I heard Commissioner Tagiev say is that there's no change in the front yard setback. The requirement here, based on the built environment around, is 0 feet setback. So the balconies and setback in the front don't really come into play here.
Okay, so I guess I'll ask a question about the practicality of splitting these two and taking them into 2 votes. Is that something that you think we can do if we do the variance first and then the CUP? I see Director Pereira has a comment on that, and Mr. Warner does too. So I'll go to Mr. Warner first, and then I'll go to Luis.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, if you'd like to split the vote, that is certainly fine. It's really up to you and how you want to approach it.
Commissioner Grill.
So, Chair, I'd like to make the motion as is and then sort of see where we are. So I would like to make a motion to move the staff recommendation based on those findings. So for approval of the conditional use permit, and then the 4 conditions that are attached to that.
So there's a motion for approval of the CUP and on the variances based on the staff recommendation and conditions. Is there a second? Commissioner
Holst. Riley or Holst? Riley?
Well, I
Whichever.
saw your hand up, but go ahead, Commissioner Riley.
I'd like to second the motion. Thank you.
All right, so there's a motion for approval of the CUP for a height and additional height, and then there's the approval of the variances for this the side and rear setback. The motion is to approve those based on the staff recommendation. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, Sonia, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
No.
Commissioner Holst,
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner,
Yes.
Commissioner McMurphy,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
No.
Commissioner Moore,
No.
Commissioner Presley,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
No.
Commissioner Taggia,
No.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood,
Yes.
Commissioner Yang, nine to five. Approval.
All right, so the matter at 470 Lexington for a conditional use permit and for variances is approved with the conditions noted in the staff recommendation. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's the site plan review. Commissioner Riley.
Yes. So this one also came out of committee. Sorry. Thank you, Chair Rangel Morales. This also came out of committee with no recommendation. But since we have recommended approval for the conditional use permit and variances, I hope that we can come to a similar agreement here. So I think we needed to entertain a motion, and I'm happy to make the motion to approve the site plan, and go from there.
Underwood, second.
All right, motion by Commissioner Riley, seconded by Commissioner Underwood. Now I'll open the floor for any discussion on the site plan review and the motion. Seeing none, Sonia, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
No.
Commissioner Holst,
Yes.
Commissioner-
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner,
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
No.
Commissioner Moore,
No.
Commissioner Presley,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
No.
Commissioner Taggia,
No.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood,
Yes.
nine to five for approval.
All right, so the site plan review at Lexington Park, 470 Lexington Parkway is approved. I see that there's a question by Commissioner Holst.
Yeah, more of a comment. I guess I don't know if there's a mechanism for us to make recommendations to the city council. And what I'm really thinking here of, I believe it was Commissioner Mitchell's comment around affordable housing for the units. They're taking advantage of unit bonus, which is nice. In the city of Minneapolis, if you have affordable housing, 60% AMI, that also meets the requirements for affordability for, say, Section 8 or for VASH vouchers, which means that in theory, people as low as 0% AMI could afford to live there. However, I do not believe in the city of St. Paul, landlords are required to take Section 8 vouchers, where in the city of Minneapolis there is. I think this is probably outside the scope of the Planning Commission, but I don't know if it's something we could talk about at some point in time to make a recommendation to City Council to consider something like that. But that would, make some of these units in this place actually truly deeply affordable. So again, I don't know if this is the appropriate time or venue, but it's something that I think we should be thinking about, or at least asking the City Council to be think about. Thank you.
I do think that that's an item worth discussing. I'll turn over to Commissioner Yang, but Commissioner Holst, let's talk about that at the end of the meeting, about what's the best way of moving forward with maybe just a proposal to City Council or a resolution, and we can get Director Pereira's input on what our options are.
That'd be excellent. I just wanted to bring it up while it's still in my mind. Thank you.
Commissioner Yang. Commissioner Yang. All right. I'm not hearing anything from Commissioner Yang, so I'll move on to Commissioner Riley on the next item.
Thank you, Chair Rangel Morales. I think maybe Commissioner Yang needs to log in and log out again because he turns purple, but nothing happens. So maybe for the next vote, that's one way to solve the problem. So our next case was 21-329-543, 540 Randolph rezoning to rezone from T2 to I1 light industrial. This is at 540 Randolph between Erie and Oneida. The applicant purchased the property and the adjacent parcel and is in the process of combining the lots through Ramsey County. Combining the lots would create a split zone parcel, and so in order to have the entire parcel be one zoning designation, the rezoning of the portion is required. And the staff findings were for approval. And the vote of the committee was also for approval, 5-0. And there were 2 letters in support of this project and no opposition, and no one spoke at the public hearing. So the motion out of committee is for approval of the rezoning from T2 traditional neighborhood to I1 light industrial at 540 Randolph Avenue.
Okay. Is there any question? Commissioner Holst, do you have a question on that? Or is that your hand from last time?
Chair, that's my hand from last time.
So is there any questions on the motion coming out of committee for approval at 540 Randolph? Seeing none, Sonia, could we get a roll call?
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Holst,
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner,
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Presley,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood,
Yes.
Commissioner Yang.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. My question is why I was not called to vote the last time.
I did call your name several times.
Okay, maybe some communication network connection issues. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
It's unanimous.
All right, so the motion at 540 Randolph for a rezoning to T2 is approved. The next item, Commissioner Riley.
Thank you, Chair. This was a conditional use permit for expansion of the McAllister campus boundary at 1657 Lincoln Avenue between McAllister Street and Cambridge Street. One person spoke in support of the application, and the staff recommendation and the recommendation out of committee is for approval. This is to this is just to have a property that had been property has been owned by the college for quite some time. There's a single family home on it that has been used for residential purposes, which is allowed in the campus, the R3 district, regardless of ownership. Now they'd like it to be added to the campus boundary in case they'd like to use it for other uses such as office space, which is part of the college campus use. And uniquely in St. Paul, we have conditional use permits for all of our college campuses. And so this is sort of a standard operating procedure for this kind of thing. So again, recommendation out of committee is for approval of this expansion of the campus boundary to include 1657 Lincoln Avenue. It was a unanimous recommendation. And that's where we are on that one. Any questions?
Any questions on the motion coming out of committee? Seeing none, Sonia, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Mr. Holst,
Yes.
Mr. Kantner,
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Presley,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood,
Yes.
Commissioner Yang,
Yes.
unanimous.
All right, so that motion at 1657 Lincoln Avenue is approved. Next item, Commissioner Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Our last item is conditional use permit for the reuse of a large structure to convert a former school to a Black Youth Arts and Healing Center and supportive housing facility for up to 16 residents at 643 Virginia Street, which is at the northwest corner of Virginia and LaFond. The recommendation, we had the applicant speak. No one else really spoke in favor or in opposition, but the recommendation from staff and out of committee for this really excellent project was a unanimous recommendation for approval with the attached conditions. And I'm personally very excited about this project. I think that the organization that is putting it together is just does amazing work, and I just want to make a note of that on the record. So that's what we've got out of the committee, and if there's any questions, happy to take them. Thank you.
Motion is to approve the CUP at 643 Virginia. Is there any discussion, Commissioner Presley?
Yes, I'm going to recuse myself from this project because I'm consulting on it. However, I do agree with you, Commissioner Riley.
Okay. See no additional comments. Sonia, can we get a roll call?
Okay, Commissioner Grill,
Yes.
Commissioner Hood,
Yes.
Commissioner Holst,
Enthusiastic, yes.
Commissioner Kantner,
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes, and I'm very excited.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Riley,
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Said,
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia,
Enthusiastic, yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood,
Yes.
Commissioner Yang. Can't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous.
All right, so the motion for a CUP at 643 Virginia is approved. And I wish we could have an item like that after a contentious earlier item on every meeting that we have. So Commissioner Riley, is there anything else?
Thank you, Chair. Just that our next meeting is on January 27th. We have only one item to consider, and that is relocation of a non-conforming use permit at 874 Fremont, which is for the relocation of a non-conforming building to allow reconstruction of the fire-destroyed building in order to provide space for an ADA accessible ramp along Fremont Avenue to the front entrance. For that property. And then I want to let folks know that the next site plan review meeting will take place on Tuesday, the 25th of January. And that is the project for review is a project called Zimtor Elementary School at 2171 Powers Avenue, which is an addition to an institutional building. And that committee meeting will be held also as a virtual Microsoft Teams meeting. And you can contact Tia Anderson and DSI if you'd like to attend. Thank you, and that completes the zoning committee report for today.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Riley. I'll turn over to Commissioner Holst or Commissioner Presley.
Good morning. We have one item today, and that is the Hillcrest Master Plan. I don't know if Director Padera wanted to present on this, but our motion today will be around openness for public review, which I'll be ready to make if Padera has no comments.
Chair and Commissioner Holst, I do have a presentation that I can share if that would be appreciated by the commission.
Go ahead, Luis.
Okay. Let me pull that up, and those of you on the Comprehensive and Neighborhood Planning Committee have seen a version of this already. It was slightly longer, but we have about 18 slides to walk through. And I will note also that the lead staff on this Bill Dermody is here, along with our lead consultant on the master planning side, Andrew Dresner, or he was here, maybe he's not here anymore. And we also have, I believe we had some representatives earlier from the Port Authority who have been involved, deeply involved, given their ownership of the site. So what I'll talk to you today about is, oh, Andrew is here. Great. Good to know. Thank you. What I'll talk about today is the Hillcrest Golf Course site and the master plan. There's several other items that go along, are proposed to go along with the master plan. And this is a draft master plan that again, the committee has recommended for release for public comment, public review and public comment, and to set a public hearing, along with those associated actions that I will mention in the presentation. So, well, this is kind of an outline of what we're going to talk about. The background for the site, the direction of the master plan, sort of how we got to where we are right now. And then the associated actions also before you today are proposed rezoning of the site, several zoning code amendments, and then one comprehensive plan amendment. And I'll go into each of those in more detail. So first of all, let's remember some key context for the site. The Hillcrest site is 112 acres at the northeast corner of the city. So at the southwest corner of Larpenteur and McKnight. It's in the District 2 Greater East Side area or neighborhood. It's a pretty hilly site. There are 10 wetlands and lots of mature trees if you've been by there. But there's also, as we've discovered, and Port Authority and consultants have provided this information, there's substantial mercury pollution related to the former golf course use, and that you'll see on the right, the map on the right. Some of the hot spots are listed there, sort of the cross-hatched or maybe red hashed areas throughout the site. So it's sort of across the site there we see contamination. The City Council adopted an ordinance in 2019. This is Ordinance 1939. This plays into the master planning. This was to allow the Port Authority to issue $10 million in bonding to finance their acquisition of the site. And so the ordinance set several key expectations for the development. And so these are listed on the screen. One of them, that generally land sales would pay for development, that there would be no, at least at that point, tax increment financing or other city subsidy for infrastructure. There was a built-in exception made for a couple of different uses. One, advanced energy infrastructure, so things like geothermal energy systems or solar panels, systems like that. And the other exception that was built in was for affordable housing, potentially, as that, if there were plans that came forward for affordable housing projects, there could be, gap needs, and so therefore the city would be open to exploring that and to considering that. Additionally, this ordinance effectively required 20 acres of parks and open space. Within that, 5 acres of active park. So think of sort of ball fields or other uses that could be for recreational purposes. And then, and this kind of plays into why the Port Authority is involved here. Substantial industrial development, including spaces for business and job creation. A market study that was done early on with the process found that there was definitely market demand to support industrial space for up to and around 1,000 jobs and approximately 1,000 housing units. So those were two kind of key guideposts that we were using throughout the master planning process in terms of development goals. So of the two finalist scenarios, the jobs focused scenario, there were two that we ended up with. The one on the right, the jobs focused scenario, was selected as the starting point for the recommended master plan. And the reason being was this scenario better met the development goals of 1,000 jobs and 1,000 housing units. The scenario has been refined in several ways based on technical considerations as well as community priorities. Some of those refinements were the city park on the northern part of the site here was moved a little bit and the shape adjusted. The design of the neighborhood node, which is signified by that circle with the 4 colors, that's the location of it, but access to it was improved, or we worked on trying to increase access to it for all people, whether you were walking or biking or driving or on transit. We also worked with our technical advisory committee and community advisory committee and consultants to increase connectivity throughout the site and across the site. We worked to improve the developability of light industrial sites, and those are signified by the purple areas. We also worked on some initial sort of design and technical considerations around stormwater and sort of an advanced stormwater solution, which we'll talk about in a future slide. And bottom line, I guess what we're trying to do is have an aspirational redevelopment plan, master plan, but also a feasible one that Port Authority and future developers for pieces of this site would be able to implement. So here is the actual draft final master plan that's before us today. And I'll walk through different components of it. The neighborhood node on the north end. So again, this multicolored circle where there's a city park in green. More intense land uses come together there as well. There could be a small amount of commercial uses as well as residential, perhaps some outdoor sort of spaces above and beyond the park. On first floor kind of patios in front of buildings. Could there be some significant public art as a focal point as people enter into the site from multiple directions? So that's kind of the concept of land use intensity at the neighborhood node. The red is the higher density residential, which would be placed close to this node or part of this node at Larpenteur. This red area could also include some commercial development, probably on the ground floor or potentially, in a separate building in close proximity to the residential. This entire red area would be proposed for T3 zoning, mixed use zoning, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. The orange is medium density residential, or T2, proposed for T2, and that is along kind of the northern and western part of the site, kind of medium density housing. The pale or yellow further south is lower density residential, and these areas kind of serve as an extension from the neighborhood to the west, and a transition between the residential and the light industrial development, and from the new to the old. And the purple is 54 acres of light industrial development. So it's strategically placed to facilitate easy access to McKnight Road. 3 wetlands of the 10 are preserved in place along McKnight Road. There's also some mitigated wetlands adjacent to them that account for wetlands impacted elsewhere on the site at a ratio of 1:1. These wetlands are integrated into the site's stormwater management system, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail later. The streets include Howard Street, that's the main north-south, what we call spine road for the development. And then there's a series of streets connecting to McKnight Road to the east. And from the north to the south, if you're familiar with this part of the greater east side, we've got Idaho, Montana, and Arlington. On the west part of the site, we have street connections to Nebraska, Arlington, and Cottage Avenues. And then there's also a north-south street, Winthrop Street, that is connected all the way from Larpenteur south to Ivy. And that connects all of the other streets to the site, even if it's a little bit indirectly. And we'll talk a little bit more about that transportation network on a separate slide, so you can kind of focus on that. So here are some figures in this table. These land uses could provide approximately these development outcomes. So, looking at something just shy of 1,000 housing units, but pretty close to it, and light industrial jobs. And we have a range here between 810 and 1,242. This reflects sort of a range of development densities for light industrial. Certainly, the Port Authority has signaled that they can achieve the 15 jobs per acre, but in the past has been able to perform a little bit above that, and so we are all hoping we can do better than that, but certainly a high enough job density for a substantial number of jobs. This is the transportation network. There are various street types established in the master plan. So there are kind of 3 different colors shown here: red, purple, and yellow. There are neighborhood node streets in red, light industrial streets in purple, and then neighborhood streets in yellow. The light industrial streets are going to be wider, around 80 feet of right-of-way. They also would lack on-street parking on one or both sides. Neighborhood streets are similar to sort of our standard local residential street layout throughout the city. And then neighborhood node streets are the most complex. fulfilling multiple functions, especially as it relates to serving all transportation modes. You'll see on this slide a cross section of Howard, which again is that north-south street that actually has all three colors, depending on where you are on it. This cross section illustrates some residential development on the left side, that those yellow boxes. You see sort of a yard and then a multi-purpose trail, a boulevard with trees, and the actual sort of driving lanes there. You will notice that all of the east-west streets are offset at Howard. None of them go straight through from McKnight to Winthrop. So Winthrop's on the west side of the site, which partly exists today, partly extended. McKnight's on the east side of the site. The fact that they're offset means that it would discourage cut through traffic, but on the other hand, still achieves our important city goals around connectivity when we have redevelopment opportunities like this. The proposed trail system on the site includes an off-street trail along the west side of Howard Street through the entire site from the north to the south, and then turns east at various points to connect to McKnight Road. There's an existing sort of trail along McKnight, along the frontage. So it connects at Ivy, Arlington, and Montana, and Larpenteur. And again, that illustration I pointed to earlier, that's kind of what this could be. This could look like. There will also be a new trail on the south side of Larpenteur, connecting from McKnight all the way west to Furnace Trail, beyond the development site's boundary. You can sort of see on the north left corner of the map image here, there's sort of a diagonal right of way that is sort of that Furnace Parkway area. The city has found off-street trails are essential for providing comfort and safety to a wide range of bike riders, not just the more fearless bicyclists who are comfortable in bike lanes. And so these off-street trails, they're essentially separated a little bit from the driving lane. It's not just a striped line on the street. So they should be more usable in that way for a wider range of bike riders. And then there are several pedestrian paths proposed near the wetland areas. Those paths could be paved or possibly unpaved. There could be some boardwalks if the areas are a little bit wet or tend to kind of get wet in these wetland areas to facilitate pedestrians. These areas will be interesting. They will help showcase the wetlands as natural amenities as well. This map is essentially what we are calling the preferred district stormwater concept in the master plan. The master plan calls for a green infrastructure stormwater system at a district scale. So not just an individual development site, but a broader district. And the concept here is one that our consultants and staff have worked out as probably feasible. It's contingent upon finding funds to pay for it. The developer, which the Port Authority's consultants, will need to fine tune and possibly change elements of this when they get into the details further down the line. But we've been talking with Public Works, talking with the Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District. So there's some degree of buy-in with this and some excitement, I would say, about it. To the point that the watershed district may choose to fund something like this, there's been some initial interest expressed by the staff. The site's high point is just south of the park, around where that letter A is on the northern part of the site. Most of the stormwater in this concept flows south and east from there. So think about it in terms of kind of a site that's going to be sloped, will continue to be sloped, but stormwater kind of traveling in those directions. The above ground stormwater features along the east side of Howard Street, which is that north-south street, along south side of Montana, which is one of the east-west streets, industrial streets, and the south side of Arlington Avenue, south of there, and the north side of Ivy. Tree trenches will line some of the streets as well. So this diagram is a little bit complex. The gray boxes signify underground stormwater, including several that are internal to the light industrial parcels, where they could be between the truck courts of buildings facing either west towards Howard or east towards McKnight. So if you think about those purple parcels, they seem pretty large, but think about that in terms of, there would be individual businesses kind of subdividing those up. You could have buildings kind of facing Howard, potentially even facing Arlington, Montana, or facing McKnight. There's also a good slide. To discuss topography of the site again because of the slope. The stormwater feature along the east side of Howard that we mentioned, this district stormwater concept, will receive water from Howard, from the street itself, but also from those residential uses along the west side of the street. So because of that slope, again, water's traveling east and south. But that stormwater feature along the east side of Howard wouldn't receive water from the industrial to the east, because that's generally sitting below Howard Street, and it's going to then flow the other way generally. So if you can envision, and this is a little bit hard to do at this point, but if you can envision yourself as a pedestrian walking along that north-south street of Howard, you'll see you're going to be looking kind of down towards light industrial. There'll be some retaining walls in places separating the light industrial parcels, just given the grade changes. And in order for those sites to be sufficiently flat for businesses, Howard Street will also be a little bit high up relative to the city park. So that will leave a little gentle slope down towards the park. Although the hills will be largely smoothed out by grading, the site will still have noticeable topography, as I think mentioned here with the way stormwater will be traveling across the site. So the master plan document has policies across a range of areas: land use and art, transportation, parks and open space chapters. Some of these policies include encouraging high-paying jobs with low barriers to entry in the light industrial areas, preferably with higher job densities. We've mentioned that. Creating a multimodal hub at the neighborhood node. So regardless of how you're traveling to and through the site, you're going to be able to access that neighborhood node easily. Discouraging vehicular speeding on adjacent neighborhood streets. Limiting the number and negative impact of curb cuts. So having a lot of curb cuts across the site. Trying to consolidate vehicle access points where we can, where feasible. So along Howard, along Montana and Arlington in particular, create opportunities for privately owned public space, POPs, sometimes people say, at key locations, and encouraging the provision of community garden space. This is something that came up a few times in the public input, and Councilmember Yang has also mentioned it as a priority as well. So definitely on everybody's radar with the site or near the site. There's a really great sustainability section or chapter in the master plan. We've got policies here listed about a variety of different elements of this, for being net zero to materials and waste management. Some of the policies you'll note are asterisked in the plan because like the preferred district stormwater solution, they're dependent on funding availability. So for instance, geothermal energy systems and compliance with the city's sustainable building ordinance. That could be triggered by city funding going into the project. I just wanted to call out, in addition to Bill Dermody as our lead staff, Mike Richardson and his role in this creation of this chapter, as well as various consultants, both to the city and to the Port Authority, very critical to the creation of this chapter. Housing. So there's a housing section or chapter of the site, of the master plan. This section references our citywide affordability goals that relate to city or housing and redevelopment authority supported developments. And that is to remind everybody in the comprehensive plan, we as a community, as a city, we would like to see 30% of units supported by city or HRA financing are going to be affordable at a range of income levels. Those are defined both on the rental and the ownership side. So we would like to try to we endeavor to hit that on this site and in this community as we would elsewhere in the city. We also focused on housing types. So we talked about 3 different density ranges with the zoning that we'll talk about in a minute, across from the neighborhood node on the high side to sort of further south, medium density, kind of near the park area, and then further south, lower density. But in addition, the other element here is housing types. So rental housing was the top priority. That includes both market rate and affordable options for people at a range of incomes. So non-age restricted. The second priority was for sale opportunities. So that could be things like twin homes, townhomes, maybe some 3-story type sort of developments. We've talked even about maybe small lot single family with ADUs as a possibility. The goal is we're trying to keep the density pretty high here so that we meet our housing targets. But looking for a range of different opportunities for sale opportunities for people. And then the third kind of priority was age restricted housing. So this could be kind of your more traditional senior housing options, potentially with services, potentially not. Could be independent, sort of market rate or affordable. Zoning, everybody's favorite subject. I mentioned there are some zoning text amendments that are proposed. There are 12 adjustments or clarifications to zoning requirements that are written right in the master plan. These will sort of help us in implementing the zoning districts that are proposed for the site, providing a little bit of flexibility with this development that you wouldn't normally have. I won't go through these in great detail. You can kind of see what they're about. We can obviously flip back to it if there are questions later. One that I will spend a little more time on is administrative modifications to the master plan. So we have a section right after the zoning section or within the zoning section that relates to what does the process look like for modifications to the master plan, whether they're minor or major. The code already gives the planning administrator some ability to make minor modifications to the master plan. A major modification would, by definition, come to the Planning Commission and the City Council for formal approval. So in addition to what the zoning code already says about that, this would be additive. This would help us clarify, help us further define what some of those modifications could be when they are smaller, when they're minor modifications. They could be administratively approved. This is based on experiences we've had with other master plans. So I'd say Highland Bridge has been a big thing that's informed us on this. Having this text in here makes it clearer for all parties. So for the city, for city staff, for members of the community, etc., for the developer. So for example, we've learned from Highland Bridge, some of the master plan modifications that are desired by the developer or by the city have required a lot of administrative process. for example, when we got from a master plan of, the roads need to be in these places, and these are generally the types of roads in terms of widths and sort of dimensions and the way that they're laid out. We needed to make, based on input from Public Works, there needed to be some small shifts made within the streets and the right-of-way widths. These were requirements Public Works put on them. And so we want to allow for some of that flexibility to be able to be made as a minor modification, as a minor amendment. Because again, if the city engineer is telling us it needs to be this way, they have that authority, and our plans should be able to accommodate that. So that's one of the bullets on here: the reduction or expansion of width of travel lanes or other right-of-way design elements, if recommended by the city engineer. Another one, I'll note the first bullet: changes of land use category of less than 10% of total site area. This is something that there's a provision for it already, and just got to be clear, 10% of the site is so it's about 11 acres, give or take 12 acres. I think it's 11 acres. Give you a sense of how much of that it could be. A few other things: if you expand park space, most folks like to hear that there's more park space. That doesn't seem like a big policy issue. That would be a minor amendment. The wetlands piece, so the city has some authority over wetlands, as well as the Ramsey Washington Watershed District. The master plan or the site will have to go through a more formal wetlands process, given they're going to be impacting wetlands. There may be some requirements put on the site with the development related to wetlands later that those regulatory authorities, we would want to accommodate those changes without a big major amendment. So this would be part of a minor amendment process. Here is a proposed map of zoning districts for the site. The whole site today is zoned R2, single family residential district. The whole site is proposed to be rezoned parallel and consistent with this master plan. The ITM area along the east side of the site is industrial transition. So it's essentially industrial with some design standards. T1 to T3M are T districts, but with a master plan. So the M just means master plan. A reminder that T districts proposed do allow for a range of commercial uses, in particular T2 and T3. However, commercial uses are expected to be naturally limited. A market study conducted for the Port Authority before the pandemic foresaw demand for up to about 20,000 square feet of commercial uses on the site. Any commercial uses that do occur are going to likely gravitate towards McKnight and Larpenteur, places where there's going to be greater visibility for commercial uses at or near or within the neighborhood node. We also have White Bear Avenue to the west that came up in the conversation with the Community Advisory Committee as well. 3 zoning code amendments proposed. One that would authorize master plans to provide flexibility from the zoning code requirements under certain conditions. So it wouldn't be flexibility from everything, just under certain conditions. The second, which would allow concrete panels in general and corrugated metal as an accent material in IT zoning districts. So for industrial developments, industrial buildings, to allow that allow these as building materials generally. And the third is an amendment to the sign code that would allow for a freestanding monument sign to serve the entire business park, not just the businesses on the same zoning lot. So given that we'll have a concentration of businesses here, instead of each lot that has frontage on McKnight having a sign, could you have one larger sign that listed multiple businesses at key locations, like say near the intersection of McKnight and Montana? Lastly, the comprehensive plan amendment. this proposed amendment is to a policy in the transportation chapter. This would allow the developer to pursue a wider range of potential industrial users. Although some industrial businesses can make do with sites that are, sort of within a 600 by 600 foot block size, that's about 8 acres, give or take, or smaller. Others sort of have larger footprint buildings, and particularly thinking about businesses that are going to provide well-paying jobs with low barriers to entry for local workers. Allowing for some larger footprints means building footprints means we would need to allow for some larger lot sizes. So in the industrial areas of the site, blocks could be up to 1,440 feet, give or take. This policy in the transportation chapter generally, I think it was written with the idea of sort of higher density vertical redevelopment, sort of, our fine grid 300 to 600 feet, sort of standard city blocks. We have some of that on this site, particularly on the north, but industrial development is a little bit different and has different needs in terms of lot sizes. But you obviously want to allow for neighborhood connectivity. So trying to balance these needs of business as well as the needs to provide for connectivity. So basically this amendment would allow for development of industrial to have that kind of connectivity, slightly larger block sizes. And so recommended today are the committee and staff recommended to the Planning Commission that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution initiating the Hillcrest rezoning study, adopt a resolution initiating the Hillcrest zoning code study. So that would be more related to those zoning text amendments. And finally, to release in the draft Hillcrest master plan, the draft rezoning maps, draft zoning code amendments, and draft comp plan amendment for public review, setting a public hearing date of March 4th, 2022. And with that, I will say thank you. We've got the website up there. I want to recognize again Bill Dermody as our lead staff on this project. Just done a great job. And I will turn it back over to the chair and Commissioner Holst to lead us through any sort of Q&A or conversation. Thank you.
Chair, if I may. Well, question and answer session. So if anyone has any questions, now's a good time. There's a lot of information here. Thank you for the excellent presentation. And yes, thanks. That was my next request is let's keep that slide up. Thank you. All right, I'm not hearing any questions or comments. Do we want to adopt all three of these at once? Is that reasonable, Director? Or Chair?
Chair, Commissioner Holtz, I think that would be reasonable. We could have a motion. I see that there is Commissioner Thomas has her hand up.
Very good. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, I guess I'm a little confused. I thought we did this at our last meeting, and then it was to go to City Council.
I believe at this point we are just opening it up for public comment, and then it's going to come back to the Comprehensive Neighborhood Planning Committee.
Okay, all right. Thank you for clarifying.
All right, well then I will, not seeing any other questions, I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution that initiates the Hillcrest rezoning study, 2, adopt a resolution that initiates the Hillcrest zoning code study, and 3, release the draft Hillcrest master plan, draft rezoning maps, draft zoning code amendments, and draft comprehensive plan amendment for public review and set a public hearing for March 4th, 2022.
So moved, Commissioner Presley.
All right, motion by myself, moved by Commissioner Presley.
Second, yeah.
Yep, seconded by Commissioner Presley. Thank you. Commissioner Thomas, do you have a question or comment? And maybe your hand's still up from before.
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
No, I just did that earlier. All right, any comments or questions? All right, can we get a roll call, please?
I'm sorry, what is one quick question? Pardon me.
Of course.
So this is gonna go up on the website. Is there any more efforts to get the public engaged in the public engagement process, or is it just a matter of throwing it up on a website and then leaving it to the public to know about this and to engage in this?
Director Padera.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Holst, Commissioner Thomas. Good question. So it is on the website. We hope that we expect there'll be some media coverage about it to drive people to this. We'd love you to spread the word as well. During the public comment period, we'll have over a month to allow people to take a look at it. I think typically we would have 30 days or at a minimum 30 days. So just generally want to get folks looking at it, reviewing it. If they have thoughts or questions or comments for us at the city or on the commission, to send those in, to consider participating on March 4th at the public hearing. And so it has the process of doing the public hearing, participating there. There'll be another public hearing later at City Council for all of this. And then the other thing I'll mention, and I noticed Port Authority's here, they have plans for some additional sort of smaller work groups to engage members of the community on sort of items that are beyond, sort of in the future, beyond the master plan, things like design, things like housing, sustainability is another area that, there's members of the community that are really interested in and want to help us champion some of the great ideas in the master plan, particularly that, we have funding needs here that we could really use the assistance of the community in making the case to, other public bodies and other potential sources. So certainly there'll be other opportunities to participate in influencing the site and in the future. But yeah, right now we're sort of beginning the official process for public review and input with this action today of releasing it for public comment and consideration.
Bill, I see you have a comment. Also, maybe even touch on a little bit of what's already been done for community engagement, because I think it's been a little exceptional this time.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. I first of all wanted to add that we will notify everybody on our email list. Due to a lot of the engagement happening during the pandemic era, we've relied on that for other engagement, and we have a pretty robust list of interested people. So we will, in addition to the usual notification on the website, we'll be sending notification to all those folks. Also, we will rely on the Greater East Side District Council for some outreach. I see Lisa Tice, their executive director, is here today and asking in the chat if we can attend their meeting and give a presentation and spread the word and facilitate discussion that way. I'm sure Luis and I could talk about that and work something out. Previously, we had 3 rounds of engagement, and this is reviewed if you want more details in a couple of places. It's reviewed in the memo at a very high level, the memo from Luis and the committee. It's also reviewed in the master plan document itself, and there are links in the document to very thorough reports that were done on all of the engagements. So if you really want to get in the nitty gritty of what we heard, we had 3 rounds of engagement early on, just before the pandemic hit, really February 2020. We had in-person engagement to establish community priorities for the master plan. We then went out a few months later in August of 2020 to talk to people about 4 general site approaches, so versions of the land use map, and got feedback then. And then, eventually in April, May of last year, 2021, we went out and talked to people about the 2 finalist scenarios and got feedback on that. It was more than just the big meetings. We certainly had a big meeting in person and some big meetings online when we were forced online, but we also did targeted engagement through pop-ups, tried to hit a more representative segment of the population, and just based on observation, the age and race of people we talked to in these pop-ups were more representative than what we had in the big meetings of what the actual population is in the area. So it was very helpful to that. Want to especially give thanks to Commissioner Said, who facilitated one at his coffee shop. We were glad to talk to the folks who were in that day. And we had several others. We were at Hmong Village. We were out on the parkway just adjacent to the site several times, catching people out in person, even during the pandemic. When it's outside, it was generally comfortable to do that. We got a lot of dog walkers and a lot of neighbors who, somewhat surprisingly, some of them had never heard of the project, so it was great to get them involved. Overall, we talked to hundreds of people throughout the process, and we got many of them to sign up their emails, and so hopefully they can re-engage here at this point when we have a fuller document. They've mostly just been commenting on the land use layout, but now we have this full document with lots of policies and an actual recommendation rather than options, so it'll be great to get many of those same people to be back involved and get their opinions on where we're at, and that will, of course, inform what the Planning Commission decides to do in March or so after the public hearing.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. Are there any other questions before we take a vote? I see Commissioner Rangel Morales, or at least someone claiming to be Commissioner Rangel Morales, is back. All right, Sonia, roll call, please.
It is me. Sorry, my computer decided to go into it's not working. So I had to jump on my partner CPU. But thank you for taking over, Commissioner Host. But
Just for this portion,
a motion in a second, and we could take a roll call.
Sonia, roll call, please.
Commissioner Grill? Commissioner Grill? Commissioner Hood?
So Sonia, this is Luis. Sorry to interrupt. Commissioner Grill put in the chat problems with my audio. Commissioner Grill, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Commissioner Hood? Commissioner Holst?
Yes.
Commissioner Kantner?
Yes.
Commissioner McMurtry?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore? Commissioner Moore? Commissioner Presley?
Yes.
Commissioner Riley?
Yes.
Commissioner Risberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Said?
Yes.
Commissioner Tagia? Commissioner Tagia? Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Underwood?
Yes.
Commissioner Yang?
Yes.
And Chair Rangel Morales?
Yes.
Unanimous.
So that motion is approved, and that would be to release the Hillcrest Master Plan and associated actions for public comment. Is there anything else, Commissioner Holst?
Just updates. Our last meeting was canceled. Our next Comprehensive Neighborhood Planning Committee meeting is scheduled for February 2nd.
Thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is the Transportation Committee. Commissioner Risberg.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Our next meeting of the Transportation Committee will be on Monday, the 24th, from 4:30 to 6. So this coming Monday, we have 2 information items on the agenda. The first is the Annapolis Street reconstruction phase 2. We'll be hearing from Public Works on that. And the other is the Kellogg Boulevard Capital City Bikeway. Again, Public Works will be giving us an update on that. So tune in if you're interested in those projects. We're always interested in getting your input and involvement. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Risberg. Any questions for the Transportation Chair? Seeing none, moving on to communications and nominations. Is Commissioner Underwood still on
Hi.
the?
Yep.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Luis, I might be looking over to you. We have as a committee and from requests of this body, we have put together our slate for officers and chairs for the next year, which we will raise and vote on at next meeting, at our annual meeting on February 4th. So thanks to the committee and those who have participated in that process. And then we continue to work closely with the mayor's office on recommendations we put forward for appointments, and did decide to continue recruiting in 2 wards where we just had very few applicants. So I really appreciate the committee members weighing in both at our meetings and via email. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Underwood. Any questions for the Chair of the Communication Nominations Committee? All right. So then we'll go to the Task Force Liaison reports. Commissioner Grill, are you able to, did you get your microphone and speaker working again? All right. Commissioner Grill? All right, so I can't hear her, but something for the commission to consider. For a variety of reasons, Commissioner Grill needs to step down from her task force. And so, Mr. Dermody, if you're on, or Luis, if Mr. Dermody's not on, I'm wondering if you could just provide just some comments about what the workload is like and the meetings on the task force that Commissioner Grill sits on, as we will need someone to step in for her. She's offered to stay on for as long as needed to find a replacement, but I do believe that we would need to find one. So if someone has any interest, please let Luis, myself know, and we can talk about what it would entail for that person to participate as the representative of the Planning Commission in that task force. Luis, do you have any input as to the meetings or the time requirements of the Riverview Corridor Task Force?
Yeah, so it's the Riverview Station Area Planning Task Force. And to be clear, Commissioner Grill is one of the co-chairs, so I know she wants to step down as co-chair. I'm not sure if she's able to continue on the actual task force or not. That's something to clarify unless Anton knows. And then Anton can probably speak to the meeting schedule and sort of number of meetings and timeline for those meetings going forward. I guess, from my perspective, knowing that you're interested in serving on the task force, if not co-chairing, that'd be good to know too. And or if you're interested in being a co-chair, because that's the part that I know she can't do, at least.
Yeah, Chair, Director, we would be looking for a new co-chair. I think it's important to have a planning commissioner in that role as somebody who understands the overall planning process in St. Paul and is looking at the station areas from a broad-based perspective. Generally, excuse me, the time commitment is about a meeting a month, basically just reviewing materials beforehand and showing up to the meeting that tend to be about hour and a half, 2 hours long. We have roughly been meeting monthly. Once in a while, a meeting will get canceled. And I would say we're about a third of the way through the meeting schedule. So it would be another year to 18 months in the process. And then once drafts are available, we'll be reviewing kind of written drafts of each of the station areas. But that's about it. Just facilitating meetings along with another co-chair from the community. And this work is led by Ramsey County and supported by consultants. So they're kind of taking the heavy load of meeting preparation. But I can answer any questions that you may have.
Anton, could you just provide an overview of what the study or the task force is considering, so that for new commissioners that came on perhaps after they had already started?
Yes, Chair. The project is the broader project is Riverview Transit Corridor Project, and it is the kind of mass transit connection from downtown St. Paul to the airport and Mall of America. So it would connect from downtown stations, run along West 7th generally, and then connect in with the Blue Line. It's proposed to be modern streetcar, which is kind of a smaller version of what we see on the Green Line. And I believe there's 9 new stations proposed as part of this project. So this project that the planning commissioner would be chairing is guiding the development of the station area plans at each of those stations. So we're kind of less concerned with the minutia of the rail line and more concerned with how that affects the land use around each station. And the task force meetings, due to COVID, have all been online. We have had one walking tour when it was nicer out. We'll probably have a couple more walking tours, but for the foreseeable future, the meetings will be online.
And we have a question about when they meet and perhaps maybe the time as well. So what date and then the time?
Right. They tend to be in the evenings, roughly 6 to 8. I'm talking slow so I can bring it up on my calendar. Tuesday evenings, 6 to 8, and we have been meeting like the second Tuesday of the month.
Okay, so if there is any interest in that, again, reach out to myself or to Luis, and it's a great project to work on. It's definitely going to have a big impact in our city. So any interest, email in the next few days, or think about it. It is another thing that you would be volunteering for, so it's another commitment. So we would appreciate certainly the additional work that it comes with it, and we understand that everybody's busy, and if you can make time for it and would like to participate, let us know. So I think I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is old business, and then I'll move on to new business and just briefly highlight what Commissioner Host said. And as today's meeting has gone on, I was hoping that maybe we could, Luis, bring this up at a steering committee meeting and then talk about it there, and then bring a consideration to the full planning commission if this is something that's appropriate for the commission to handle. Is that something that the steering committee could handle, Luis?
Chair, I think we could talk about that. We haven't met as a steering committee in a while, so we're probably overdue anyway. We could add that to the agenda, and that would give me a chance to look into sort of scope in terms of what the best mechanism might be if the commission wants to formally recommend something, that the council look at something, or if there's more informal mechanisms that we might want to use as a part of that. I might follow up with you or Commissioner Holtz just to better understand exactly the question. I understood it as to be sort of requirements related to rental apartments or projects accepting Section 8 vouchers. There's been some places where there's been ordinances that require that of every multifamily development of a certain scale or something like that. So just to clarify exactly what that idea is, and can report back to the steering committee about any next steps we could take.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, it's just whether it would be a discussion about whether it's within our purview and our scope to be able to make a suggestion or a recommendation about that, and if so, whether that's the discussion for the steering committee would be what type of how to handle that, then put it in front of the planning commission for any comments or suggestions. But I think the first step is just understanding whether it's something we could even approach. Commissioner Host, does that sound like a viable plan to you?
Yeah, I think discussion with the steering committee would be fine. And Director, I think you have a pretty close understanding of what I'm talking about here. So starting at the steering committee would be good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other item for new business that commissioners would like to discuss? We can add it to the agenda at the next meeting. All right, seeing none, that will go ahead and conclude the January 21st, 2022 St. Paul Planning Commission meeting. Thank you everybody for joining. I hope everybody stays warm. Everybody has a good weekend. If you do have an interest in that Riverview task force, please reach out to myself or Luis. I'm sure we would all appreciate it, but specifically Commissioner Grove. So thanks everybody and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take
Goodbye,
care.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.